Ghost stories to help you fall asleep. One, My Kid and the Ghost. It's been a while since I wrote a story, mostly because I was so busy with life and having 2 little kids running around the house. I've had experiences with spirits all my life, so has my mother and other members of my family. I did some research into this, and I probably have some empath abilities and probably some other abilities. I just can't put my finger on them all, nor have I developed them, and I don't begin to know where to begin with it. In any regard, I posted a bunch of stories about my house and the experiences I have been having there in the past. Because things got so busy in the house, I stopped paying attention to the various events. I have 2 kids, 4.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old now, and a non-believer wife. At least she doesn't want to admit to it. I had the house blessed at least 3 times, blessed it myself, with improvement in the activity each time. To the point there is just a level of baseline activity that is tolerable, such as seeing things in the corner of your eye, feeling of being watched, and it happens in waves. What prompted me to write this is that I wanted to see if anyone ever had experience with this, and the activity is starting to get stranger. A few months ago, my dog Reggie, a 150-pound Rottweiler who was as sweet as could be and 7 years old, got very sick at my parents' house. He was 7 years old, and it appears my parents' neighbor poisoned him. He got so sick that he couldn't move. Vet diagnosed him with diabetes and pancreatitis at first. Didn't improve with treatment, and I had to put him to sleep. Prior to this, I got a tox screen on him and found he had high levels of arsenic and antifreeze in him. I can't even express how bad this has been for me, and worst off, I don't have proof the neighbor did it. Anyways, when Reggie was sick, my kids said they saw him walking around the house. He wasn't at our house at that time. My oldest son was convinced there was a black dog hiding in the closet in the sunroom of our house. Took me there. I couldn't see anything, but I did feel like I was being watched, and did feel a presence. I did not acknowledge this. I asked him if it was Reggie. He said no, just a black dog. Another time, he saw Reggie in our TV room and said it was Reggie. So the black dog freaked me out because he can tell the difference between Reggie the Rottweiler and a black dog. Also, the black dog was in the sunroom. My other son claims to also have seen the black dog. This happens on occasion, and there hasn't been a black dog sighting for a few months. Fast forward to the past few weeks. Out of nowhere, this putrid smell started to come out of the sunroom. The smell was that of rotting flesh. It's happened before and disappeared. This time it was in your face. It was so strong you would gag in the room. I looked all around, couldn't find a source of the smell. Looked outside, nothing. Looked up in the rafters, nothing. I'm a physician, and I know how rotting flesh smells like. And this is flesh that is right in your face. So something was big and dead, or it was right there. Oddly enough, the smell would move from one corner of the room to another. As mysteriously as the smell came on, after a day or so, it disappeared. I've had this happen at my house before, and we couldn't explain it. We also have smelled the smell of incense that was used in the blessing in various areas around there, almost as being mocked. The strange thing is that my kids can play there when the smell is around and not be bothered one bit, and they don't smell it, only my wife and I. What bothers me even more now is that my mother, who is with the boys while my wife and I are at work, was bringing my kids home from the library, and my oldest said, "I don't want to go home, it's haunted." My little one replied, "Yes, it's a demon." I have never talked to my kids about anything paranormal going on in the house. Have never used the term haunted or demon around them. I don't even watch paranormal shows with them around, and I don't know how they came up with it. My 2.5-year-old is joking and saying we are going to die over and over as well. Now this kid is not afraid of anything. My oldest son has some issues with speech and sensory issues. Small noises scare him, easily scared, has a bit of a speech delay, otherwise as a normal kid. Kids don't act out. They don't interact with anyone who is or isn't there. What I have noticed is that my wife and I fight a lot lately, and it's usually over stupid things. I'm home from work and stupid things are said, or there is a feeling of hopelessness, and that this is the same old routine day after day. I know some of it is just the parenting blues and being tired, but this is all happening when my kids are talking about this haunting and a demon. In terms of what I've seen or experienced, I've had some really vivid and strange dreams, ranging from being lost in a field I'd been at before, to things I can't remember but wake up remembering them. I occasionally see shadows in the corner of my eye, and sometimes orbs or shadows right in front of me. I've sat in the sunroom by myself and kind of spaced out. I wouldn't call it formal meditation. I had this weird feeling or thought in my head that popped up that people were playing with a Ouija board in the sunroom at one time. Again, it was just a weird thought, and I'm not sure what that means or if I should trust this. I'm not quite sure what I should do. Part of me wants to invest in some EMF detectors and investigate this. Another part wants me to try another blessing. What frightens me is that my kids see this and kind of know something is going on. To Loco and Speed, the not-so-imaginary friends. In the house we rented previously, we had a few unusual guests from time to time, mostly after our son was born. My wife and I would often catch glimpses of them as they moved around the house, but we never felt any negativity from them. In fact, I got the distinct feeling of family popping in to see the new addition. I left them alone. Sometimes things would go missing from where you put them. I would ask politely for it to be put back when they are done with it, and the items were always returned to the spot they vanished from. I'm pretty sure a lot of you will know what I mean. However, when our son, Connor, is 4 now, going on 40, and has an amazing imagination, started to walk and talk, he would often speak about his friends, Loco, who he blamed for everything, and Speed, calls anything that goes fast Speed. Loco was apparently a little brown-haired boy, and Speed apparently looked like Connor. As he is an only child, we took them to be imaginary, as most kids have imaginary friends at his age. Just after we made the decision to get our very own place, I was putting him to bed one night, and he told me that he and his friends are very sad that we are moving away. I thought he was referring to his creche friends, so I explained that we are only moving to a new house, but he would be in the same creche. He said, "No, not my school friends, my home friends." I asked him which friends he was talking about, and he said that Speed was very sad because Loco is being nasty and says that he can't come with us. I told him not to worry, because even though friends can be far apart, they can still be friends, and that he mustn't be sad. After I tucked him in, I went to the kitchen to start the tedious task of clearing out the cupboard. About 10 minutes later, I heard some noises from his room. Sometimes he will lie in his bed and play with a toy when he's not tired. So I called out that it was not playtime and that he should go to sleep. The noise stopped, called back that he wasn't playing. Loco is. So I went to check, and he was still lying as I had left him, all tucked in. I played along with him and made a show of trying to usher Loco out of his room. He started laughing hysterically. I asked him why he was laughing, and he said, "Because Daddy, Loco is not by you." So I asked him where Loco was, to which he replied, "He's behind you making funny faces." I turned around, put my hands on my hips, put on my best daddy voice, and said, Come, it's not playtime now, it's time for bed," and again ushered Loco towards the door. "He's going now, Daddy." 2 nights later, my wife was away on a business trip. My son was asleep, and I was packing some boxes in the lounge. After about 2 or 3 hours, I gave up on the packing, put something on the TV, and must have nodded off. I got woken up by what, at first, I thought was my son putting his hand on my arm. I very clearly heard his voice say, Come, it's time for bed." It took me a second to realize that the face I saw in front of mine was not my son. It looked very similar, but distorted slightly. I got a bit of a shock, rubbed my eyes, and when I took my hands away, it was gone. I dare say that it freaked me out a little bit. I ran to my son's bedroom and he was still fast asleep. When my wife returned the next day, I told her about it. She's not a complete skeptic, but she also believes that our minds can play tricks on us, especially when we are tired or stressed. With the upcoming move, we were both, but I started to suspect that Loco and Speed weren't that imaginary after all. Cut to the night before the move. My wife was asleep next to me. I was scrolling through my phone, as one does when you can't sleep, and I swear I heard the sound his little feet made when running down the passage towards our room, and then abruptly stopped. I was expecting to see the usual sleepy little face appear around the door and ask to sleep in our bed, though I waited and waited and waited for what must have been about 5 minutes. I was just about to get up and check if he hadn't fallen asleep on the floor or something to that effect, when my wife suddenly wakes, reaches out as if to pick him up onto the bed, and realize there was no one there. She turned to me, eyes wide, and asks where our son is. I told her I'd check. I got up, walked to his room. He wasn't in the passage, saw he was still in his bed, and walked back to our room. By this time, she was wide awake. I told her that he was still in his bed and asked her if she had had a bad dream. She said no, but she could swear that she had felt his hand on her arm and heard his voice say, Come, wake up, mommy." We chatted about it for a while, checked on him a few times, and eventually went back to sleep. On the second evening that we were in the new house, we were unpacking dishes in the kitchen. Our son was playing in his new room upstairs when we hear a door slam shut. We both called out, got no reply. I was halfway up the stairs when I hear the door open, and our son came running out of his room, tears streaming down his face. I took the last 3 or 4 steps in one bound, grabbed him, thinking he may be hurt, and asked him what was wrong. After he calmed down, he said that Loco didn't like the new house and was being nasty and had scared him, slammed his door. I said to him that I thought Loco couldn't come with us to the new house. He said no, only Speed didn't come. Loco did. Now I may not be a mama bear, but don't mess with my boy. I barged into his room and put it very bluntly to this Loco that he is not to scare Connor, and that I think it is time for him to go back to where he came from. Connor said that Loco was gone. The next night, we were playing a game in the lounge. Connor likes to build forts, which is basically just him throwing a blanket over his head. When all of a sudden he stops, looks past me at the stairs, gets a frightened look on his face, and throws the blanket over his head. I ducked under the blanket and asked him what was wrong. He said that Loco was on the stairs and he was angry at me for telling him to go away. I pulled the blanket off my head and turned to look at the stairs but didn't see anything. I did, however, feel a bit of tension from that area. I ducked under the blanket again and told him that I couldn't see Loco. He looked again and said that he was still there. Apparently Loco had changed and was now tall and thin with long fingers and sharp teeth, and he was angry. I told him that Loco couldn't hurt us because I wouldn't let him. I got up and told Connor to follow me. We went to my special cupboard, and the two of us began cleansing the house. I made him part of it so as to give him confidence, although it was mostly lost on him. When we were done, I asked him if Loco was still in the house, and he said no. Since then, he has not seen or heard from Loco again. Now I realize that this could all be attributed to an overactive imagination on his part, and the stress of moving and all that comes with it on ours, but I am interested to hear what you all think. I find it strange that I never once got a negative feeling when in the old house or the new. The only time I felt anything, and it was only briefly, was when he said that Loco was on the stairs. The little girl in white. I didn't realize how long this was going to be. Sorry if it's too long to read, I understand. I'm a writer, so I tend to get carried away with all the details, even the boring ones. But this is all very real, and I had to let it out. I've never truly believed in ghosts or spirits until recently. You see, my grandparents moved into a new home about 2 years ago. They were in debt and lost their previous home in the country and decided to relocate closer to the rest of their family. With my grandparents are 3 children. The first is their youngest son at 13 years old. Call him Joey. Yes, my mom has a 13-year-old brother. The other 2 are my cousins that they adopted because my uncle was too unfit to be a parent. Call them Allie, who is 12, and Scott, who is 8. Anyways, this story is more about them than it is about me. They lived there for about 3 months before it was Christmas Eve, where my entire family gets together to celebrate at my grandparents' house. Allie was in her bedroom with her 2 younger cousins, who are both around 4 and 5. Up until this point, there had been no problems. The girls had been in the room together, playing fine, until Allie came running out with the 2 little ones, sobbing hysterically. Nobody could calm her down or get her under control. She has a history of being paranoid and frightened easily, as she was under the government's care a lot, so her freaking out isn't entirely out of the norm. Still, we had never seen her so terrified before. Once she was calm enough to speak, she told my grandmother that she had seen something in her room. A little girl, to be more specific. Our littlest cousin Cam, who is 4, had been standing in front of a play vanity and had been turned away from the mirror, staring at something behind Allie. Allie, who had been concerned for the 4-year-old, kneeled in front of her to see what was the matter and what she was staring at. But before she could even ask, Allie seen in the reflection of the mirror that there was a little girl in a white dress standing behind her. Thus, freaking out, grabbing both of the little girls and running out of the room in hysterics. Nobody took it seriously, especially because, like I said, Allie has a history of being paranoid, which is normal after everything she's been through. My grandma assured her that it was nothing, but Allie was convinced of what she had seen and refused to enter her bedroom for the remainder of the night. I, however, was more skeptic, and a part of me did believe that she'd seen something because I'd seen the fear in her eyes, and it wasn't normal. I took it upon myself to ask Cam what had happened, since nobody else had, her being 4 years old and all. After the incident, she had clung to her mother for the rest of the night, refusing to leave her side. When I was able to get her alone, I asked her what she'd seen. Her only reply was, "A mask." I figured that she was little, and the only way that she could describe what she had seen was relating it to the one thing that all little kids are afraid of: masks. For the rest of the night, that was it, and it all kind of went by forgotten. Now, I can't specifically remember the order of events that took place next. It's all sort of like a blur as strange things began happening. Small things, really. I visited my grandparents' house often and even stayed there during the week sometimes, since it was near my college and convenient. Lights turning off, TVs shutting off for no reasons, things randomly falling, that sort of. Ally was constantly scared, and she showed it when these sort of occurrences took place. She became hysterical around me a few times, and I had to hold her for a long time to try to calm her down. She also didn't like talking about the things going on whatsoever. The boys were somewhat unaffected and knew about the small thing, but didn't seem very convinced or bothered, as they shared a room and were oblivious. My grandpa was ignorant, and my grandmother, to the very core of her soul, refused to believe that such a thing could be possible. She believed that since the home was older, it was nothing more than electricity problems. I experienced my first dose of these strange occurrences one night, when me and my 8-year-old sister Lily spent the night. My 13-year-old brother also stayed the night. He slept with the boys, while me and Lily slept in Allie's room. Me, being the oldest cousin, and all decided that I'd take the twin bed, while the two of them made a comfortable bed on the floor. However, I woke up in the middle of the night, around 2 or 3 a.m. I laid there for a few moments, motionless, before realizing that I had to use the restroom. When I returned, I checked on the girls to find that they were still peacefully asleep, before laying in the bed and trying to go back to sleep myself. My eyes were closed when I heard a small, tiny voice clearly say, "Mommy, I'm tired." I was so terrified that I couldn't move. It took me a while before I could lift my head to check on the girls again and see if one of them had said it. But they were both still in a deep sleep. Convincing myself that it was one of Allie's silly talking toys, I forced myself to go back to sleep. I told Allie about it the next morning, and she was convinced that she had no toys whatsoever. Talk. She said that she had cleaned out her room before moving and gave away all her babyish talking toys to our little cousin Cam. We raided her room for the rest of the day, looking for any explanation as to what the voice could have been. And like she had said, we found nothing. And I was left rattling my brain and wondering if I had been half awake. But a part of me is still sure of what I had heard that night. Later on that week, I had been in the backyard, playing fetch with my dog, when the next-door neighbor, an older man, had stood next to the gated fence to be friendly and ask about my dog. After discussing our dogs for a few minutes, he somehow later went on to tell me about how the piece of land my grandparents had moved on had once been a park. But after some time, a home had been built onto that piece of land, and that home had been tragically ruined in a fire. So the landlord that was currently renting the home out to my grandparents bought it and rebuilt it. I was baffled, and suddenly a lot of things made sense. He didn't know if there had been any casualties, as he hadn't lived in his home at the time. Only heard about it. I tried telling my grandma, but she continued to not believe, and eventually we all decided to stop talking about and to ignore the small incidents that occurred. But they still happened, unfortunately. When Allie was in the boys' room, watching them play video games one afternoon, the bottom mattress to the boys' bunk bed flew up in the air, or falling back down. All three of them claim this happened, and came out just as hysterical as Allie had been the first day she'd seen that little girl. Me and my boyfriend spent the night in Allie's room with her sleeping on the ground, and both woke up to the sound of someone whispering in our ear. Allie was helping my grandma bring in groceries through the garage when the garage door was suddenly closing on them. The button on the garage door has to be held in order for it to go down. My little sister was over at my grandparents' just last weekend, watching TV with Allie in the living room at night, when she claims to have seen a figure walking by. A girl in a white gown. She called to the figure, thinking it was our grandma, but when she entered the kitchen, nobody was there. When Allie and Scott fell asleep on the couch one night, Scott woke up screaming and claiming that something was biting his toe. Things seemed to be getting worse and more physical, especially towards Allie, who will try to go to sleep in her room, but sometimes come out into the living room quietly with her blanket to sleep on the couch. She doesn't like talking about it, but she recently opened up to me that sometimes when she tries to sleep in the room, she feels something on her back, something touching her back, and almost like a breath on her neck. I'm worried about her, and I talked to my friend who is more in tune with the stuff, and she believes that this spirit is latching onto Allie because it's feeding off her fear, or because it's also a little girl who is clinging to her. I have no idea, and I honestly don't know what to do because I've never dealt with anything like this before. And I'm worried about Allie, who is in a constant state of fear in this home. She's been through enough in her life, and my grandma is too stubborn to think of this as real. But we've all experienced it. Granted, Allie's been there every time something has happened to anyone, and is the common denominator. If you've gotten this far, do you have any thoughts? Advice? I'd really appreciate it.